Imagine stepping into a cold stone chamber, the firelight casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. You look toward the mantelpiece. Sitting there are not clay sculptures or marble busts. They are heads. Real, severed human heads. Some are fresh, others are decaying. They are the faces of the most beautiful children in the region, preserved like twisted trophies. The master of this castle stands before them. He lifts one gently, strokes its hair, and plants a passionate kiss on its cold, dead lips. He whispers to it, admiring the way death has preserved its beauty. This sounds like a scene from The Silence of the Lambs, or the darkest fiction imaginable, but this was real. This was France, in the 1,430 seconds. And the man kissing death was not a recluse hiding in the shadows. He was Gilles de Rais, a marshal of France, a national hero, and the right-hand man of Saint Joan of Arc. How does a knight in shining armor become a monster known in folklore as Bluebeard? Buckle up. We are descending into a nightmare that challenges the very limits of human morality. To understand the monster, we must look at the cradle. Born in 1404 on the border of Brittany, Gilles de Rais didn't just have money. He had owned half of France money, but his foundation was built on trauma. At age 11, he watched his father die in a gruesome hunting accident, mauled to death by a wild boar. His mother died soon after. Gilles was left to his grandfather, Jean de Craon, a man who was ruthless, calculating, and morally bankrupt. Jean didn't teach Gilles compassion. He taught him that the law was for poor people and that power justifies everything. Under this toxic guardianship, Gilles grew up brilliant, fluent in Latin, and artistic, but with a soul that was slowly warping. He was taught that his desires, no matter how dark, were commands that must be obeyed. The seeds of the monster were sown here. In 1429, the destiny of France changed with the arrival of a peasant girl, Joan of Arc. Gilles, then a fiery 5-year-old, was assigned to protect her. It was the most unlikely duo in history, the holy virgin chosen by God and the arrogant, violent nobleman. Together, they were unstoppable. They broke the siege of Orléans and turned the tide of the 100 Years' War. Gilles fought like a demon, earning the title Marshal of France. He was a hero. But here is the terrifying truth about war. It normalizes death. Gilles saw fields of corpses, smelled the blood, and realized he liked it. While Joan fought for God, Gilles found a thrill in the violence. When Joan was captured and burned at the stake in 1431, the only moral anchor in Gilles' life was incinerated with her. The hero died that day. The monster was unleashed. Gilles retired to his vast estates and began spending money with a manic intensity. He staged massive plays, fed thousands of peasants, and dressed his servants in silk and gold. He even built the Chapel of the Holy Innocents, a name that would soon drip with irony. But his fortune began to dry up. Desperate to maintain his lifestyle, Gilles didn't cut costs. Instead, he turned to the occult. He believed that alchemy could turn lead into gold and save him from bankruptcy. Enter Francesco Prelati, a young, charismatic Italian priest and self-proclaimed necromancer. Prelati became Gilles' spiritual guide into darkness. He convinced the marshal that a demon named Baron guarded a massive treasure. But Baron didn't want gold. Baron wanted pure pain. And what is purer than the suffering of a child? The pattern of the crimes was a perfect, terrifying trap. Gilles' servants would scour the starving countryside, looking for young boys with beautiful faces or angelic voices. They approached poor parents with a golden ticket. Let your son serve the great marshal. He will be fed, clothed, and educated. For a peasant family in the 1400s, this was a miracle. They handed their sons over with tears of gratitude, believing they were saving them from poverty. They didn't know they were sending them into a slaughterhouse. The children would walk through the castle gates and vanish. No letters home. No visits. When parents asked questions, they were told the boys had been sent to other castles for training. But the villagers noticed the smoke rising from the castle chimneys at odd hours. The smell was wrong. But who dares accuse a marshal of France? What happened behind those walls? When the truth finally came out, it was nauseating. Gilles didn't just kill, he turned murder into a ritual. He would bathe the children, feed them fine meals, and comfort them to gain their trust. Then, the game would change. According to court records, he would hang the victims until they lost consciousness, then cut them down, revive them, and hang them again. He savored the transition from life to death. He wanted to see the light leave their eyes. After death, the horror continued. He would dissect the bodies, fascinated by their anatomy, and as we saw in the beginning, he would keep the heads of the most beautiful victims to talk to. He later confessed that he did this not for the demon, but for his own exquisite pleasure. The gold never appeared, but the blood kept flowing. For 8 years, Gilles de Rais murdered with impunity. He thought his noble blood made him untouchable, but he made one fatal calculation error. He didn't get in trouble for killing peasant children. The nobility didn't care about them. He got in trouble for attacking the church. In 1440, over a property dispute, Gilles stormed a church and kidnapped a priest in the middle of a sermon. This was a direct slap in the face to God and the state. The Bishop of Nantes, who had long heard the dark rumors, finally had his excuse to strike. He launched a secret investigation, and the dam burst. Witnesses, servants, and grieving parents finally found the courage to speak. In September 1440, the Duke of Brittany's army surrounded the castle. Gilles, the great warrior, didn't fight back. He surrendered quietly, almost as if he was exhausted by his own evil. The trial was a spectacle. He faced 2 courts, the civil court for murder and the ecclesiastical court for heresy and sodomy. At first, Gilles was arrogant. He insulted the judges, calling them simoniacs, and refusing to answer. But the church had a weapon sharper than any sword: excommunication. They threatened to cast him out of the church, meaning his soul would rot in hell for eternity with no Christian burial. For a medieval man, this was a fate worse than death. Gilles broke. To save his soul, Gilles de Rais confessed, and he held nothing back. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as he detailed the murders of what is estimated to be between 140 and 800 children. He described the game of death, the trophies, the rituals. He implicated his servants, Henriette and Poitou, who confirmed the locations of the remains. They spoke of burning bodies in the fireplaces and throwing bones into the castle moats. It was a catalogue of horrors that cemented Gilles as the first modern serial killer in history. On the 26th of October, 1440, a massive crowd gathered in Nantes. Gilles, dressed in white to symbolize repentance, gave a speech. He didn't beg for his life. He begged parents to discipline their children, blaming his own crimes on a lack of discipline in his youth. He was hanged, and his body was placed on a pyre. However, because of his rank and confession, his family was allowed to retrieve his body for burial before the flames consumed it. His servants were not so lucky. They were burned to ash. Case closed, right? The monster is dead. But wait. History is never that simple. In 1992, a panel of legal experts and historians in France held a retrial of Gilles de Rais using modern standards of evidence. Their verdict? Not guilty. Why? No physical evidence. During the 1440 investigation, despite the claims of hundreds of murders, no bodies were actually found in the castles. Torture. The confession. The smoking gun was extracted under the threat of torture and excommunication. In the Middle Ages, you would confess to killing God himself if the rack was waiting for you. The motive. Who benefited from Gilles' death? The Duke of Brittany, the man who prosecuted him, immediately seized all of Gilles' vast lands and titles. Was this the biggest legal frame-up in history? Was Gilles de Rais a flawed, occult-obsessed man who was painted as a monster so his enemies could steal his fortune? Whether he was a demonic predator or a victim of ruthless politics, the legend of Gilles de Rais remains a dark stain on humanity. If he was guilty, he shows us that monsters don't look like monsters. They look like heroes, wrapped in velvet and protected by power. If he was innocent, he shows us that the system can be just as monstrous as any killer, willing to crush a man to steal his gold. We may never know the absolute truth of what happened in those cold castle nights, but one thing is certain: the line between a hero and a villain is often drawn in blood. What do you think? Was Gilles de Rais the original serial killer, or was he the victim of a medieval conspiracy? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into the darkness of history, hit that subscribe button. We have many more stories that your history teachers were too afraid to tell you. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.